Welcome to Techlandia, a podcast about and for the technology industry, a place to learn, connect, and engage with leaders and thinkers involved in the technology industry. You can check us out at techoregon.org, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome to our latest edition of Techlandia. I'm Skip Newberry, and I'm excited to have with us today Adam Trexler, who's the CEO and founder of Valaurum. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Skip.
You know, I'm excited for you to share a little bit about the company. But first, I would like to ask, if you could maybe take a few minutes here to share a little bit about your own professional journey. How did you end up in the Portland area?
Oh, yeah. Well, kind of a funny story. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, actually in Maryland. And my early 20s, I worked with a number of startups in all kinds of sectors, but really became familiar with early stage angel investment financing. And kind of got tired of that and thought I was going to go in a totally different direction. And was really drawn to teaching and went back to school, got a PhD at the University of London, and was really pursuing an academic career. I had a number of academic interests, but one of the big ones for me was the cultural history of money. So specifically, thinking about the early 20th century. Why did the gold standard collapse? And how did the meaning of money change as we moved from a gold standard where you could redeem your currency for gold, your paper money for gold, to something a little bit more esoteric and something based on the government or society and the wealth that was stored there? I was really fascinated by that historical moment. I was kind of just pursuing that academic world and pretty focused on that, but always had a dream to get more involved in money in the contemporary moment. It was obvious from 2008 that we were in a very strange time with regard to money. And, with all the sort of banking collapses and the sudden mistrust, something that I've been thinking about for a decade, but it's the sudden mistrust of banking institutions and what was money, and then the emergence of cryptocurrency, et cetera. And I learned about this core technology to deposit significant amounts of gold onto a thin film using technology from things like semiconductors. And I was just fascinated by it. And I spent maybe 9 months investigating that technology, really learning about it. And I just was compelled. I had to do it. I had to get involved. And in 2012, I founded Valaurum to commercialize that core technology.
That's awesome. And I had no idea about the sort of intellectual curiosity and the history of money and culture of money. That's fascinating. It makes a lot of sense, kind of, now knowing where you are today with Valaurum. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Valaurum. So if you could take us from 2012 to, let's say, present day. What are some highlights and challenges that you encountered along the way as you were, pursuing this opportunity with Valaurum?
Well, I could tell you about 100 missteps, Skip. But when I started the company, I really thought the technology was near done. I was working with a couple of engineers, and we were able to make a bill with atomically deposited gold that was worth, that had 50 milligrams of gold on it. So you'd have about $3 worth of gold. And it turned out that kind of nanotech to do that. If you wanted to make 5,000 bills, you were going to pay about $30 to manufacture $3 worth of gold, which was an utter disaster, not tenable at all. The other thing was that there were real problems with the counterfeitability of the bills in their early form. And so we really worked on three things for the first few years. It was really about getting that cost structure under control at a very basic level. And I think I about halved it every year, which gets harder and harder. The second problem was really making a better and better product, and I founded the company in Portland, and we really had a wealth of design talent, and I really tried to get better and better designers to make a more and more attractive product. And I sort of thought that, to be honest with you, here's one of those mistakes. I thought, gold, it's fantastic. It's a world currency. It's held by central banks. People will own it for the logic of it. And turns out that's not true at all. It has to be a beautiful product. And so we've really worked hard to get better and better artists involved with the project. And being, having the wealth of Portland for that, with all the kind of design firms and design-based businesses like Nike and Adidas and pick any number of others. That was really a strength for us, or became a strength for us. So then the third piece, taking up till about 2019, was we could just deposit a certain amount of gold, but we couldn't really do different thicknesses, and the consequence of that was that we couldn't really give the amounts of gold that people wanted. So by 2019, we could deposit anywhere from $2 to about $100 worth of gold in a single bill. And at that point, we were able to span people's, basically familiar paper currency. And I want to give a bit of context there. The reason for this technology is that gold, which is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, trillion with a T, has become unaffordable to people, specifically in physical form. And so a gold ounce coin, like the one I have on my desk, at a $2,000 price point, it's really pricing out most of the world's population. And so we were trying to create more access to gold, and we thought if we could hit those price points that paper money follows, we'd be in pretty good shape. And so in 2019, we could do that. And we had been selling relatively small amounts before, but our growth just took off. We have doubled every single year making a physical product since 2019 through 2023. And that's kind of been the story. In 2020, obviously we had COVID, and we outstripped some of our early production strategies, and I started putting together a facility in Portland. And then we really had to hire through COVID for that facility. If people remember those horrible supply chain problems, we were hit by every single one of them. We had a boat on the water 2 months longer than it should have. We were trying to get equipment built internationally. We couldn't travel. It was a really tough time to hire, to build, to construct. But in spite of that all, we got the facility done, and really hit our stride in 2022, and then in 2023 we're able to double capacity again in the facility, and looking to do the same with more equipment come 2024. So we've been on this kind of trajectory of really commercializing a very difficult physical process, and we're kind of going into it finally with a lot of confidence that we can scale it as needed.
That's great. So in terms of some of the products and offerings that you provide, I mean, can you describe a little bit what those are and sort of who your ideal kind of target market is in terms of, is it folks who are trying to, essentially diversify their portfolios and add some assets that are going to be a little more behave differently, say, than typical currency or stocks, or is it people who are like in the collectible space, or is it both? Is it a combination of those things?
It's really both, Skip. And we started out actually in the collectible space because we could, deal with margin there. And, we worked with some fantastic licensors. We've, had Disney and Star Trek and Star Wars. And currently we're just starting to get into the trading card space and work with two of the biggest trading card companies there for, NFL, NBA, MLB, B cards. And I'm really excited about those and the margins that we're able to generate there. But the kind of big play has always been in this currency space, and I mean currency broadly. Currency is this enormous space, and it's one that I don't think a lot of your audience will be familiar with thinking about as it is, which is to say, there's about $2.3 trillion worth of paper US dollars out in circulation. Most of the value of that, because all the value is in hundreds, most of the value of that actually goes abroad. The euro, it's the same thing. And the entire paper money space is worth about $10 trillion. The gold space, the physical gold space, is probably worth 8, with 2/3 of it in jewelry, 1/3 of it in coins and bars. And then there's a number of other ways that people hold physical value. But holding value, having tangible wealth, is this like critical human need that's universal. And that need is greater in times of instability, whether that's national instability, international instability, war, COVID, etc. But it's just this fundamental human need that people have, and it's not going away because of a digital economy. It's actually growing. So what we're trying to do is bring modern technology to bear on that and develop products that people really want to own and will hold value. So for all of that $10 trillion of paper money, almost all of it globally is losing value, and people are paying for the right to have physical money by inflation. Inflation is the cost of owning physical money. And as we've seen in the last year, that cost could be 5, 10, 30, 50% in some cases per year. Gold, interestingly, and also silver, has this different performance where it could actually appreciate in value against paper currency. And people are really drawn to that if they have access to it. So in the US, we've been lucky to have a very strong currency. Globally, people are desperate to own gold. And we're trying to make that accessible to more people and really provide access to the fat 80% of the market that has not had access in the last 20 years, as gold has gone from $300 to $2,000 an ounce.
That's fascinating. So in effect, you're essentially offering a more accessible alternative or hedge to relatively volatile currency markets globally.
That's right. That's right. And we have a number of products. So you could think of this as just we make gold bills, but really we actually make gold bills for countries who want to issue gold. So we're a private mint to countries. We've worked with 7 countries so far. So we literally make legal tender currency for them. And then we also make private gold, by which I mean, we talk about gold bullion. So gold where people are just investing in it because of the value of the gold, regardless of a governmental issuance. So we serve both of those markets. But either way, we're trying to make gold accessible to people and give it in a more valuable form.
That's a fascinating just observation that there is such a thing as a private mint. And so I think most people would be like, wait, really? Really? So how much of that represents a growth market for you all? Like how many do all countries essentially have some reliance on private mints in some form or another?
Yeah, so it's actually fairly rare by number. If you think of the number of countries, it's fairly rare that a country can have the full infrastructure of a mint and printing works. And even when they do, they're typically relying on private contractors to provide things like security development. So there's a whole world of banknote printing and coin minting, and private companies do a lot of that work. What's interesting about us is we are an absolute technological leader in the minting sector, and so much so that we can radically expand what governments are able to offer to their citizens. So, in our country, in the United States, gold is often talked about as this kind of, or let's just say it can have a sheen of anti-governmentalism. But what's interesting is the biggest issuer of gold and silver in the country is the US Mint. And indeed, we have Ed Moy, the former director of the US Mint, on our board of advisors. So, from my point of view, what's most interesting to me is getting gold into the hands of as many people as possible and helping them to protect their wealth. And whether that's through a government or not, we're just very eager that people have access.
So shifting a little bit to one of the other markets that you mentioned you're serving as it relates to collectibles, do you see that particular aspects of the collectibles market as growth opportunities for you all? You mentioned working with some major sports card manufacturers. Are there other areas where you see expansion opportunities that you're pursuing?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working with a number of other licensors that we're really excited about. Um, the collectibles space is just fascinating, and one of the things we saw through COVID was just this incredible growth of things like, crazy stuff like Pokemon cards selling for tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and sports cards the same thing, and of course, there's a robust art market and so on. So we really think that can grow, and we have a couple of uh, very intriguing brand partnerships that'll be coming out in the next few months that we think can grow there. And this really just kind of helps along our story of exposing something that's very, very new to people, and giving them a way into a new class of ownership.
So as we think about some of the growth of the company, you've been on a bit of a tear in terms of expansion and building out the new facility. And as you look to the future, what are some of the areas that you're going to be focused on from a hiring standpoint in terms of talent needs?
Yeah, well, so we went in 2019. We had 4 full-time employees, and we're hovering around 50 in Portland now. Um, I think we're growing in two directions over the next year or so. One is skilled technicians. Portland has this wealth of high-tech manufacturing, um, technical people. So we get a lot of our operators and technicians from, former Intel, former Lam, that kind of semiconductor space. People really catch on quickly if they have that kind of background. So we've really sought to hire from that pool. And then we expect to be growing significantly and expanding our kind of top line executive team as well. So really looking for more C-level employees who can step into roles there as we keep having this thing where what's one person's job halves and then halves again, and then suddenly you have 4 people doing it. And we think over the next year there's going to be quite a bit more of that, and so we're really looking to make more connections in that kind of C-level world in Portland and beyond.
That's great. That's great. I'm sure there's plenty of people who listening to this podcast to be like, wow, that's a really cool company. I would like to learn more and maybe work there. So that's good. One thing I wanted to ask was, as you've had this sort of window into the local tech community over the last, 10 years or whatever, what are some of your observations in terms of selling points that, as you're looking to grow your team, you're definitely going to be accentuating? Because that's one thing that's top of mind for a lot of folks right now is, what does the next 10 years look like after the pandemic inflection point, right? Because there's some trends that have stuck and others that are, completely reoriented, and some are going back to normal, like normal being pre-pandemic. And so it's a different world than it was going in. And I'm wondering, what are some of the things you're looking at that you view optimistically for this region heading into the next few years?
Yeah, I think, well, several things, Skip. I think one thing I would say is that as this region can cultivate high-tech manufacturing, I think we'll have a huge strategic advantage there. I did not want to set up a facility, say in, not to trash talk, but in the Seattle area or California. I just thought the cost of living was way too high, and it really hard for skilled manufacturing workers to have a good living. And I think Portland has still a reasonable balance of livability and high tech manufacturing. So I'm really excited for that in the region. I'm also excited about globally. I think that the U.S., what I would say is 10 years ago, nobody in the U.S. seemed very excited about U.S. manufacturing. And now, post-pandemic, I think there's a bit more anxiety about shipping everything in terms of manufacturing away. And I think that there's a real opportunity to grow certain kinds of manufacturing here and really develop products out of that, really develop the space. So I'm interested in other companies that are doing something similar, which is bringing something to market that is hard to make, and seeing what can be built here and bringing good jobs with that. I think the other thing that is going on in Portland is, when I founded Valaurum, there just wasn't a very big investor community, and most of our early capital came from outside the region. And what I see is some more trends toward investors getting excited about this region's companies, where they can really learn what they're doing, understand what they're doing, and hopefully have a greater connection to the company. So, I'd really encourage your listeners and the broader Portland community to get involved with what are the exciting up and coming companies in this area, and see if you can be a part of that. And that's not investment advice. It's just a simple observation of we do have some exciting companies, and I'd love to see more people in the region participate in that.
Great observations. I mean, I think just anecdotally, we're seeing far more interest from out-of-state VC and private equity funds in the last, I'd say, probably 4 months than I've seen since pre-pandemic in terms of making visits to the area. What are the companies that we're seeing that they should be paying attention to, et cetera. And of course, we've got, to your point, like some interesting local funds that have grown in size and capabilities over the last 5 to 10 years, and that's a good thing, especially at the early stage level. And just to comment on the semiconductor side of things, I was doing a talk with Damon Runberg, who's an economist with Business Oregon, and he did a slide as part of the talk where he showed semiconductor R&D talent in Oregon, which is engineering related, relative to the next 10 states that have a lot of semiconductor employees and workforce. Oregon is twice as concentrated, has twice as many R&D related engineers as the next 10 states combined. So we are arguably the center of gravity globally for semiconductor R&D as it relates to the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I think about the fact that you all are in a very much a semiconductor adjacent category that is benefiting from the same policies and the US is pursuing with attracting more manufacturing activity back on US soil, coupled with the fact we've got this incredible talent base here. I mean, it's that what you all are doing and sort of the trajectory you're on is something that I'm hopeful more folks will start to pick up the flag and champion a bit more, because we need more successes like yours in terms of what you're seeing so far here. It's a great story.
I completely
yeah, go
agree,
ahead.
Skip, and I think that one of the things I'd say is we've been hugely benefited by angel investors who've seen their value, the value of their shares go up exponentially, and to the extent that people are able to get involved, not with necessarily huge sums of money, in that angel community and looking for early stage companies. I'm really passionate about that. People have great ideas and they need capital, they need other help, and they need executive help. And to the extent that we can have take those good engineers, good people doing R&D, people coming up with innovative ideas, and turn those into companies and industries that can change the world. I would love to see this area do more of that. I think there's real opportunity for growth there over the next 10 years. And I know you're passionate about that as well. And I couldn't be more passionate about it. I mean, as somebody who's done it sort of the hard way, I think there's a lot more that could be done there.
I think most founders would ask, is there an easy way?
I certainly haven't found it.
That's great. So as we kind of come up to our 30 minutes or so here, can you think of, is there a topic or sort of an observation that we haven't covered that you would like to kind of end with here as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is interesting about the space you're creating, about this region, is we have this center of excellence, exactly or what you're saying, around semiconductor R&D and some other kind of global brands. And I think there's a tendency for the investment community and just top talent in this area and throughout the United States to really be pretty parochial. And what I mean by that is we tend to think of the US market first. We have global reasons for that. But I'm hugely excited by the opportunities in developing countries. And I think that the taste, the growth in those markets, the needs of the next couple billion people who will be growing in wealth and what they want is absolutely critical. And most of gold consumption is in Asia, and India and China are the two leaders, and that is only going to grow. There are 100 other examples of where is taste going, where are the markets for consumption going, and I think we could do a much better job in the kind of entrepreneurial community thinking about what do we what is our expertise, but also how can we shape products and market movement for a much more international audience. And I'd like to see more of that, and I think we all have something to learn about that, Valaurum included.
That's a great observation. And I think for a state like Oregon that's relatively small in terms of the size of its economy, a lot of tech companies have to by nature be export oriented from the beginning. And so I love it that you're challenging folks to think even bigger, right? Yeah, the US market's big, but you've got all these opportunities globally that are emerging. And it'd be a shame to ignore them.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thanks again for sharing your story with us and spending some time. I know you're busy. It's one of the more fascinating companies, I have to say, I've come across in 14 years of covering startups and tech companies in the local area. So that I think that says a lot, because I've seen a lot. But thanks for spending the time with us today. Look forward to doing more work together and helping support you in your efforts over the course of this next year and beyond. And thanks again for spending time with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Skip.